So what do we have here in the news out of Zero Hedge, which was recently banned by Facebook, but it appears that they are back. We got another story regarding the Federal Reserve, as Jerome Powell was on 60 Minutes, and I do enjoy fact checks, especially of central bankers. So I'm going to go into the story originally authored by Michael Leibowitz at realinvestmentadvice.com. Here on Zero Hedge, as the article says, Jerome Powell on 60 Minutes. Fact check. And as the article says, on Sunday, March 11th, 2019, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell was interviewed by Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes. We thought it would be helpful to cite a few sections of their conversation and provide you with prior articles in which we addressed the topics discussed. And as it continues, we have been outspoken about the role of the Fed, their mission, and policy actions over the last 10 years. We are quick to point out flaws in Fed policy for a couple of reasons. First is simply due to the enormous effect that Fed policy actions and words have on the markets. Second, many in the media seem to regurgitate the Fed's actions and words without providing much context or critique of them. The combination of the Fed's power over the market coupled with poor media analysis of their words and actions might expose investors to improper conclusions and therefore suboptimal investment decision making. And as it continues here, with that, we review various parts of the 60 Minutes interview and offer links to prior articles to help provide alternative views and insight, as well as more thorough context of Chairman Powell's answers. I always love Chairman Powell. It always reminds me of like Mao or something, and that's kind of their job description. Anyway, as it says here, can the Fed chairman be fired? Pelley, do you listen to the president? Powell, I don't comment on the president or any elected official. Pelley, can the president fire you? Powell, well, the law is clear that I have a 4-year term and I fully intend to serve it. Pelley, so no in your view? Powell, no. And as it goes, and again, the Fed is by government decree, legal tender laws. Let me just refresh this. Zero Hedge does this all the time. There's some issues keeping it going, and there's probably going to be ads popping up. Anyway, this is another issue. I'm going to continue this in a moment, but this is another thing that people talk about a lot. Does the government have control over the Fed? The Fed's private, all that kind of stuff, but it's by legal tender laws. The Fed wouldn't matter at all, really, except for those who stupidly throw their money at fiat, or not fiat, or by the U.S. Not legal tender. Again, if there's no legal tender, that wouldn't even be an issue. Again, it wouldn't even be an issue if the government wasn't enforcing it. Because then we wouldn't have to pay off the interest on the debt. We wouldn't have forced usury forced upon us by the government through the central banking system and the banks who do fractional reserve lending, etc. But anyway, getting back to the article, our take. Yes, the Federal Reserve Act, which governs the Fed, makes it clear that he can be fired for cause. Chairman Powell, you're fired. Okay. Does the Fed play a role in driving the growing income and wealth inequality gaps? Pelley, according to federal statistics, the upper half of the American people take home 90% of income, leaving about 10% for the lower half of Americans. Where are we headed in this country in terms of income disparity? Powell says, well, the Fed doesn't have a direct responsibility for these issues, but nonetheless, they're important. Our take, inflation hurts. That's what I've been saying, but inflation hurts the poor and benefits of the wealthy. The Fed has an inflation target and therefore takes direct policy action that fuels the wealth divide, 2% for the 1%. As it continues, will Chairman Powell know when a recession is upon us? Pelley, this is the longest expansion in American history. How long can it last? Powell, it will be the longest in a few months if it continues. I would just say there's no reason why it can't continue. For years, our take. In January of 2008, Chairman Bernanke said a recession was not in the cards. I remember this well. It turns out the official recession started a month earlier. Recession risks are likely higher than you think, as an article out of Zero Hedge previously noted. How healthy is the labor market? Powell, so the U.S. economy right now is in pretty good place. Unemployment is at a 50-year low. Our take, we continually hear about the strength of the labor market. While that may seem to be the case, wages are the labor participation rate paint a different picture. And then it says, do record high stock valuations represent healthy financial conditions? Pelley says, we have seen big swings in the stock market in the United States. And I wonder, do you think the markets today are overvalued? Powell, we don't comment. Yeah, they really don't want to. We don't comment on the valuation of the stock market particularly. And we do though, we monitor financial conditions carefully. That's an odd way of putting it. Strange quote. Our interest rate policy works through financial conditions. So we look at a very broad range of financial conditions. That includes interest rates, the level of the dollar, the availability of credit, and also the stock market. So we look at a range of things. And I think we feel that conditions are generally healthy today. Our take, we beg to differ with over 100 years of history on our side. Yeah, you think? Continuing on here, it says, is the Fed chairman aware of the burden of debt and its economic consequences? Pelley, but the overarching question is, are we headed to a recession? Powell, the outlook for our economy, in my view, is a favorable one. It's a positive one. I think growth this year will be slower than last year. Last year was the highest growth that we've experienced since the financial crisis, really in more than 10 years. This year, I expect that growth will continue to be positive and continue to be at a healthy rate. Apparently he's never studied the economy throughout all of history. Our take, the record amount of debt on an absolute basis and relative to economic activity is a burden on the economy. Expectations should be greatly tempered. The economic consequences of debt and economic theories, debt-driven realities. I think that was another article out of Zero Hedge before. Does Chairman Powell bow at the altar of the President and Congress? On December 17th and 18th of 2019, President Trump tweeted the following, and I quote, "It is incredible that with a very strong dollar and virtually no inflation, the outside world blowing up around us, Paris is burning and China weighed down. The Fed is even considering yet another interest rate hike. Take the victory." Whatever you say. Oh, man. I hope the people over at the Fed will read today's Wall Street Journal editorial before they make yet another mistake. Also, don't let the market become any more illiquid than it already is. Stop with the 50 Bs. Feel the market. Don't just go by meaningless numbers. Good luck. Pelley, your Fed is apolitical. Powell, strictly non-political. Considering the Fed made an abrupt U-turn of policy following the tweets above, a sharp market decline, and very little change in the data to justify it, we think otherwise. The summary, the Fed has a long history of talking out of both sides of their mouths. They make a habit of avoiding candor about policy uncertainties in what appears to be an effort to retain credibility and give an appearance of confidence. The Fed's defense of their extraordinary actions over the past 10 years and reluctance to normalize policy is awkward, to say the least, and certainly not confidence-inspiring. As evidenced by his responses to Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes, Jerome Powell is picking up where Bernanke and Yellen left off. This article aims to contrast the inconsistencies of the most current words of the Fed chairman with truth and reality. Thinking for oneself and taking nothing for granted remains the most powerful way to protect and compound wealth and avoid large losses. All right, guys. So let's get into this a little bit. First of all, this talk about Trump potentially firing Powell and then replacing him with someone like Herman Cain is absurd. It just shows that it'll perpetuate the problem forever. And then on top of that, we also have the issue of the Federal Reserve in general and central planning and printing money out of thin air. All fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero. They always have, they always will, going back to 1024 AD in China. And it's always been the case, and it always will be the case. So when are we going to learn from that? We need to look at the subjectivity of value, the theory of subjectivity of value, which is based on scarcity, application, use, and demand. And when we have this currency printed out of thin air based on faith, while countries swap out of it, and it looks to be that China and India will replace the United States in the near future as a world superpower, and I don't support any empires, but again, this is a reality. It's quite clear to me that it's all, jumbled nonsense when we hear Trump complaining and we hear Powell complaining and we hear Powell saying everything's fine and then Trump saying everything's not fine, but it's all good in the stock market, which is a huge bubble. Everyone's wrong in this case. Presidents don't really have control over the economy. The government as a whole does dictate the economy to the Fed, but the Fed makes its own decisions. As Alan Greenspan said, we answer to nobody. And I think it's important to point out that as long as we centralize an economy, and this is something that happens in every country in the world, we will continue to create inflation, price of living will go up, and the government will always continuously try to aid it with more dependence by trying to tax people more, regulate more, and create more problems. It's cancer versus cancer versus cancer versus cancer. So again, we need to protect ourselves, and there's more solutions than there are problems. Individuals must be self-sustainable and independent and responsible and understand money, because if you control your money doesn't control you. You control it. Wealth insurance is important. Gold and silver, and this isn't investment advice, this is simply my opinion, but we look at history and it says the same. And decentralized, properly, fundamentally useful cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, again, that's properly decentralized. So we will continuously look into this as we are on the verge of a major crisis in the economy, the likes of one we've never seen before, because it was pushed off, yield curve inverting, banks are still bankrupt. The longer we wait, the worse it's going to be, and we need to allow it to come down and watch it come down and break free and rebuild from a decentralized, free market, non-interventionist system based on individual demand. So anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Bye.